Susan, let go. What are you doing? What are you dragging me to? I'm not touching you, said Susan. Someone is pulling me. Oh, oh, stop it. Everyone noticed that all the others' faces had gone very white. I felt just the same, said Edmund, in a breathless voice, as if I were being dragged along. A most frightful pulling. It's beginning again. Me too, said Lucy. Oh, I can't bear it. Look sharp, shouted Edmund. All catch hands and keep together. This is magic. I can tell by this feeling. Quick. Yes, said Susan. Hold hands. Oh, I do wish it would stop. Oh, the next moment, the luggage, the seat, the platform, and the station had completely vanished. The four children, holding hands and panting, found themselves standing in a woody place, such a woody place that branches were sticking into them, and there was hardly room to move. They all rubbed their eyes and took a deep breath. Oh, Peter, exclaimed Lucy, do you think we can possibly have gone back to Narnia? It might be anywhere, said Peter. I can't see a yard in all of these trees. Let's try to get into the open, if there isn't any open. With some difficulty, and with some stings from nettles and pricks from thorns, they struggled out of the thicket. Then they had another surprise. Something became much brighter, and after a few steps they found themselves at the edge of the wood, looking down on a sandy beach. A few yards away, a very calm sea was falling on the sand, and the tiny ripples that it made hardly any sound. There was no land in sight and no clouds in the sky. The sun was about where it ought to be at 10 o'clock in the morning, and the sea was a dazzling blue. They stood sniffing in the sea smell. By Jove, said Peter, this is good enough. 5 minutes later, everyone was barefooted and wading in the cool, clear water. This is better than being in a stuffy train on the way back to Latin and French and algebra, said Edmund. And then, for quite a long time, there was no more talking, only splashing and looking for shrimps and crabs. All the same, said Susan presently, I suppose we all have to make some plans. We shall want something to eat before long. We've got the sandwiches Mother gave us for the journey, said Edmund. At least I've got mine. Not me, said Lucy. Mine were in my little bag. So were mine, said Susan. Mine are in my coat pocket there on the beach, said Peter. That'll be 2 lunches among 4. This isn't going to be any fun. At present, said Lucy, I want something to drink more than something to eat. Everyone else now felt thirsty, as one usually is after wading in salt water under a hot sun. It's like being shipwrecked, remarked Edmund. In the books, they always find springs of clear fresh water on the island. We'd better go and look for them. Does that mean we have to go back into all that thick wood, said Susan. Not a bit of it, said Peter. If there are streams, there's bound to come down into the sea, and if we walk along the beach, we're bound to come to them. They all now waded back and went first across the smooth, wet and sand, and then up to the dry, crumbling sand that sticks to one's toes, and soon began putting on their shoes and socks. Edmund and Lucy wanted to leave them behind and do their exploring with bare feet, but Susan said that that would be a mad thing to do. We might never find them again, she pointed out, and we shall want them if we are still here when the night comes and it begins to be cold. When they were dressed again, and they set out along the shore with the sea on their left hand and the wood on their right, except for an occasional seagull, and it was a very quiet place. The wood was so thick and tangled that they could hardly see into it at all, and nothing in it moved, not a bird, not even an insect. Shells and seaweed anemones or tiny crabs and rock pools are all very well, but you soon get tired of them if you are thirsty. The children's feet, after the change from the cool water, felt hot and heavy. Susan and Lucy had raincoats to carry. Edmund had put down his coat on the station seat just before the magic overtook them, and he and Peter took it in turns to carry Peter's great coat. Presently the shore began to curve round to the right. About a quarter of an hour later, after they had crossed the rocky ridge which ran out to the point, it made quite a sharp turn. Their backs were now at the part of the sea which had met them where they first came out of the wood, and now, looking ahead, they could see across the water another shore, thickly wooded like the one they were exploring. I wonder if that an island, or do we join on to it presently, said Lucy. Don't know, said Peter, until they all plodded on in silence. The shore that they were walking on drew nearer and nearer to the opposite shore, and as soon as they rounded each promontory, the children expected to find the place where the two joined, but in this way they were disappointed. They came up some rocks which they had to climb. From the top they could see far away ahead, and oh bother, said Edmund, it's no good. We shan't be able to get those other woods at all. We're on an island. It was true. At this point, the channel between them and the opposite coast was only about 30 or 40 yards wide, but they could now see that it was in the narrowest place. After that, their own coast bent round to the right again, and they could see open sea between it and the mainland. It was obvious that they had already come much more than halfway round the island. Look, said Lucy suddenly. What's that? She pointed to a long, silvery, snake-like thing that lay across the beach. A stream, shouted the others, and tired as they were, they lost no time in clattering down the rocks and racing to the fresh water. They knew that the stream would be better to drink up further away from the beach, so they went at once to the spot where it came out of the wood. The trees were as thick as ever, but the stream had made itself a deep course between high mossy banks, so that the stooping you could follow it up in a sort of tunnel of leaves. They dropped on their knees by the first brown, drippy pool and drank, and dipped the faces in the water, and they dipped their arms up to the elbow. Now, said Edmund, what about those sandwiches? Oh, hadn't we better save them, said Susan. We may need them far worse later on. I do wish, said Lucy, now that we're not thirsty, we could go on feeling as not hungry as we did when we were thirsty. But what about these sandwiches, replanted Edmund. There is no saving them till they go bad. You've got to remember, it's a good deal hotter here than in England, and we've been carrying them about in pockets for hours. So they got up the 2 packets and divided them into 4 portions, and nobody had quite enough, but it was a great deal better than nothing. Then they talked about their plans for the next meal. Lucy wanted to go back to the sea and catch shrimps, until someone pointed out that they had no nets. Edmund said they must gather gulls' eggs from the rocks, but when they came to think of it, they couldn't remember having seen any gulls' eggs and wouldn't be able to cook them if they found any. Peter thought to himself that unless they had some stroke of luck, they would soon be glad to eat eggs raw. But he didn't see any point in saying this out loud. Susan said it was a pity that they had eaten the sandwiches so soon. 1 or 2 tempers very nearly got lost at this stage. Finally, Edmund said, Look here, there's only one thing to be done. We must explore the wood. Hermits and knights-errant and peoples like that always manage to live somehow if they're in a forest. They find roots and berries and things. What sort of roots? Asked Susan. I always thought it meant roots of trees, said Lucy. Come on, said Peter, Ed is right, and we must try to do something, and it'll be better than going out into the glare and the sun again. So they all got up and began to follow the stream. It was very hard work. They had to stoop under the branches and climb over the stoop under the branches and climb over branches, and they blundered through the great masses of stuff like rhododendrons and tore their clothes and got their feet wet in the stream. Still there was no noise at all except the noise of the stream and the noises they were making themselves. They were beginning to get very tired of it when they noticed a delicious smell, and then a flash of a bright color high above them at the top of the right bank. I say, exclaimed Lucy, I do believe that's an apple tree. It was. They panted up the steep bank, forced their way through the shambles, and found themselves standing round an old tree that was heavy with large yellowish golden apples as firm and juicy as you could wish to see. And this is not the only tree, said Edmund, with his mouth full of an apple. Look here and there. Why, there are dozens of them, said Susan, throwing away the core of her first apple and picking her second. This must have been an orchard long, long ago, before this place went wild and the wood grew up. Then this was an inhabited island, said Peter. And what's that? Said Lucy, pointing ahead. By Jove, it's a wall, said Peter, an old stone wall. Pressing their way between the laden branches, they reached the wall. It was very old and broken down in places, with moss and wallflowers growing on it, but it was higher than all but the tallest trees, and when they came quite close to it, they found a great arch which must once have been a gate in it, but they were now almost filled up with the largest of all the apple trees. They had to break some of the branches to get past, and when they had done so, they all blinked, because the daylight began suddenly much brighter. They found themselves in a wide open place with the walls all around it. And there were no trees, only level grass and daisies and ivy and gray walls. It was a bright, secret, quiet place, and rather sad, and all four stepped out into the middle of it, glad to be able to straighten their backs and move their limbs freely. And that's all of chapter 1. And in chapter 2 is called The Ancient Treasure House.